Hi, this is Jessie Gender, and you're listening to Warm Blanket.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Warm Blanket podcast, where we embark on a journey to see what makes us feel good about Star Trek, where our love comes from, and what it means for us. In short, what is our warm blanket? My name is Gary, I'm your host, and I'm very honored to welcome here my special guest today, Jessie Gender, amazing YouTuber, storyteller, writer, podcaster, and video producer, just to mention a few of her trades. She is the host of the widely popular YouTube channel titled Jessie Gender, where she dives into eye-opening topics from Star Trek and the other sci-fi shows, bringing us closer to better understanding behind transgender roles and in our society and within our fandom as well. She's a very friendly Trekkie who I was fortunate to come across with. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a very warm welcome to Jessie. How are you today?
Hi. I'm doing really good. I always, whenever people introduce me, I'm like, oh gosh, stop. No, compliments. I don't like it.
I know, it's like, who is this person?
Yeah,
have I met her?
They sound really cool. Can't be me then, of course.
But jokes aside, you really did a lot of things. When I was reading it on your website, I mean, I did have a little peek, so I didn't just pull it out from my backstory in here, but you did a lot of things, and I do have to ask, did you have to advertise, or did you have to hunt down America's funniest videos?
No, that was like a weird. I did work for America's Funniest Home Videos for about a year or so, I guess, which was basically I was just editing their YouTube channel. So if you like go on their YouTube channel and you see like their like random clips of a bunch of random stuff, that was I edited those for about a year. It's weird because you like for that show they have like their own database of everything they get sent in. So you have like they have like literally millions of videos that I'd have to sort through. So it was just a fascinating job because you just see it. They save you send something in America's Funniest Home Videos, even if they don't use it, they save it. So they have tons of crazy stuff on there. It was a fun job to have for a little while.
Oh my, I can imagine, like, sometimes I did catch it in the UK a few times, and I didn't really understood, like, do people literally just send these videos into a central database, like someone sends an advertise, like, hey, send me in your funniest videos, and we might edit it into your...
Yeah, they have like a whole like their system there is they actually rate it. So the people will send it in. I forget exactly how they send it by email or whatever, but like by phone. They used to have it on tape, and they still have those databased as well.
Oh, wow.
But they have this big central database, and they have like poor interns who have to look at every single video and rank them. So they had like a ranking system from like 1 to 5 of like how good they are. And then I go in and like I type in like basically their YouTube videos is like they take all the 3s, like the middle ones, and then they just shove them into a YouTube video to make something, and then they save all like the 5s for the actual show itself. So
wow.
Yeah, it's a crazy system, but it's you can see that people send in weird stuff. I'm not. I think I'm probably under some sort of NDA, so so I probably can't talk about it. But there's some crazy videos that are like, why would you send that in? People see that. It's kind of fun.
And I guess they're just like, nah, you know what? I'm gonna be famous one day because of this.
Exactly. People think this is gonna be their way to stardom, and I guess it's like, I someone saw it. I guess I did. Some poor editor has to watch your crazy videos.
Oh my. So you're really a jack of all trades in a sense, like in terms of the creative industry. I mean, you do write podcasts, edit videos, and you do mini documentaries on your channel as well. So how did you become? So what was the first thing that you were like, oh, I want to be a storyteller, I want to be a video producer? Because you started with editing and writing. So what was the initiative? Let's say.
I mean, this is gonna sound like it's like begging the question or whatever the phrase is, but like Star Trek, really. I mean, that's really very much where my impetus to want to be a storyteller came from. I mean, if you go way back, I don't know how much research you did, but like the first writing and creative storytelling I ever did was my Star Trek fan fiction that I did years and years ago. That it still exists somewhere in the ether if you look for it. Yeah, back when I was a little kid, I used to write my own Star Trek fan fiction, and I got inspired by Star Trek to want to write, and that's why I went to college for film,
Hmm.
because that's kind of what I wanted to do. And then the other element of it was I also just edited a ton when I was a kid. Like I used to, I think I probably put them on private now just because I do other things on my YouTube channel. But
Hmm.
I my first ever videos were like edits of different science fiction shows, like the music video sort of thing that a lot of editors start off as. Like my first ever video was actually a Doctor Who one, which was the Doctor and Rose, just sort of like a very very like emo kid video of like, oh, the Doctor and Rose, they miss each other so much, and it's such a sad story, and it's like it was like set to that old song of like, if I could turn back time, I'll go where. Yeah, it was like songs
Wow.
to that. So yeah, I sort of like. I like being someone who like gets my hands into everything because I find everything so interesting.
Hmm.
So basically, I wanted to tell stories. I got fascinated about telling stories through science fiction and Star Trek and all those things. And so every time I just have an idea of like I want to do a cool video or I want to do these things, I just try and push myself to try and do something new, whether it be
Hmm.
like trying to write something or perform in something. And so it's all just spurned by like me being
Hmm.
excited and curious about trying something new and wanting to mix that with trying to say something that feels meaningful to myself. So
Hmm. So I guess the evolution to onto your channel regarding, because you touched on it as well, of course. Um, so it was kind of natural, like whatever you had in mind, you didn't have to do it within a certain set of guidelines. Like the companies you worked before, you kind of you know let your creative wings flow.
yeah, and I mean, so the element that like spurned the actual like impetus for the channel itself was kind of a few things where um I think I think the main impetus of it was anxiety.
Hmm.
Of one of the big things that I sort of deal with is and I've talked about this on my channel a lot, is that I have a lot of like anxiety in my life, social anxiety and personal anxiety and just
Hmm.
anxiety about the world. And one of the things that always prevented me from wanting to be more creative, or prevented me from being creative because I always wanted to be more creative, was this fear of uh, worry that what I would make wouldn't be perfect, and also worry that I wasn't good enough. That anything that I
Hmm.
make just was not good enough, and could never be good enough compared to, you know, anything else that anyone else would put out. And so, starting the YouTube was kind of a way to force me to have to create something on a weekly basis. It's like, look, if you want to do a YouTube channel, you have to do something every single week. And I mean, that's how you just build an audience and do things. And I didn't
Yeah.
really expect it to take off as much as it did, but um, what I what I wanted to just do was do it for myself and say, like, look, you're going to make something and you're going to get it done every week. And it's going to be something that you make from your own voice. Because as you said, I had a bunch of jobs that I got to be creative in. Like at the time that I started the YouTube channel was I was working at Pride Media, which
Hmm.
is an LGBTQ editorial brand. And I got to make videos and star in videos and do things for them. But that was on someone else's, you know, prodding.
Hmm.
And so I was like, I want to do this for myself. I want to trust my own voice and trust what I have to say is worthwhile.
Hmm.
But the only way I'm going to do that is if I actually sit down and force myself to create deadlines for myself.
Hmm.
And so the channel was just sort of building off of that to try and just trust in my own voice and what I have to say, and trying to just not let good be the enemy, or perfection be the enemy of the good. It's like,
Hmm.
just make something and allow yourself to put out stuff that you don't feel meets your standards in my brain, because that's the only
Hmm.
way that you can improve yourself.
Wow. That kind of reminds me of the time when I started. I did everything for the same reason, just like, just for myself. And I think that's the beauty of it when you like creating something. You don't really you don't necessarily create for someone else, even though it reaches to a bigger audience. But you do it for yourself, for your own pleasure, your entertainment, and as it matter. I mean, and if someone tags along and watches and listens and connects with your arts and crafts, let's say,
Yeah.
then that's always just a good thing. It's a good feeling to
Yeah,
have.
and I feel like from what I found is like the things that people latch onto the most and the things that people are most willing to follow you along with are the ones that you feel most passionate about. Like,
Mm,
I there are certainly things I know I could do that would just be like chasing the algorithm and chasing the bear that would probably do decently well, but they would be algorithm bait, they would be clickbait, they would be these things that like are what like sugary snacks that like someone would watch because it's clickable, but they wouldn't really
mhm,
connect to it. But the videos that like are meaningful to me are the ones where like I talk about my anxiety or I talk about an issue that means something to me, like the women in Star Trek video I did, and like how
mm,
women were treated on the show and things like that. Like those were issues that I was passionate about talking about. And sure, my 1 hour documentary on women in Star Trek may not be the most like clickbait algorithm bait piece, but you look at the comments and you look at what people reacted to in that video, it feels more meaningful. And that's what inspires me,
mm.
that like the weird thoughts like spiraling around my brain pan somehow connect with someone else's weird brain pan thoughts in a resonant way. And that's the coolest thing, I think.
And it's crazy. Like I remember, I think the first couple of videos, and we came out like half an hour from your repertoire, and I was like, that's just mental. Like how much work. I mean, I know myself. Like a 10-minute video can cost you hours and sometimes days of work. Um,
Mhm.
with research and putting together everything, and sometimes you have to record yourself twice because you messed up something in the first time. But half
Yep.
an hour, kudos to you to do all of this. And I just really, I wanted to say, not just for the sake of the podcast, but well done, and awesome work that you do on your documentaries, because all of these videos are like 45, 50 minutes, sometimes in an hour. It's like almost like watching a documentary, and it's like an episode of Star Trek, but like in a form of a commentary, which is I really enjoyed the Fandom Menace one, the
Which the
anti-disco, and
talking back to my
yeah, that
yeah yeah
that
yeah
was
yeah
that was awesome. That was really
yeah
good. I think that's
that one was
still one of my
fun.
favorite.
That one was just fun to do. I was just like, oh, this just so fit, the like yelling at each other, listening to each other, just so maps so perfectly onto that. Let this be your last battlefield or final
Hmm.
battlefield or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
I was just so perfect, and so I was like, I have to do it. I have to put on the makeup. It would just be a ton of fun. Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned the like length of videos, because that's always something that I try to pare down. Like every time I sit down to write a video, I'm like, all right, it's gonna be like a 2-page script, so I
Hmm.
can get up my point. But I'm just like an endless researcher and endless like, oh, that's a cool thing. Oh, that's a cool thing. So every time I sit down to write a script about an idea, I'm like, but it also connects to this idea, and it also connects to this idea. And so I'm just like laying out every single piece of information that I've like
Hmm.
found tangentially interesting to this topic in there. And every time I sit down to write a 2-page script, it ends up being like 6 or 8 or 10 pages. And it's just like, and then I just look at it, I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna have to edit that and film that.
And and
It's
and
gonna
you
be
and you
so long.
end up like Mariner in the new shots, like multiple pictures connecting to each other. Like, this is the whole
Yes,
picture.
exactly. Yes, exactly. Like have like the like tack board with all the the string. So yeah,
Gosh.
it's fun, but it's also sort of like, oh God, I always give myself way more work than I ever intend to.
But listen, I think that's the beauty of it. I mean, as long as you enjoy it, and you kind of, as I think it's true. You concentrate on a bigger picture. It's not just like one snippet, like, hey, this is what we're going to talk about, and that's it. No, you branch out, and you come back at the end to the same topic, and it's like, like maybe we wandered off a little bit, but this all connects, and that's good, because some people doesn't see the connection between those things. And it's awesome. So kudos to you for making these documentaries, and we look forward to see what's coming in the future.
So do I. I always be like, God, when I finish a big project, I'm always sort of like, oh God, what do I do next? what's the next like big thing? So I'm just as excited as you are to see what comes spilling out of the brain pan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think naturally we have to go into this topic, because I have to go in. No, I don't have to. I'm really curious about this. When, or rather, how did you get into Star Trek?
Oh God, I've mentioned this a little bit in my other videos, but like the way I've gotten into Star Trek is probably the the weirdest and maybe worst way you could get into Star Trek, which was the first time I ever remember encountering Star Trek. I'm sure I did beforehand because my dad would probably have it on or something because he was a big Trek fan. But the first memory I have of Star Trek that like really felt like it galvanized my fandom was my parents were divorced when I was a kid. So every weekend on Friday afternoons after school, my mom would drive me half an hour, because my parents lived about an hour apart, so I would drive half an hour to meet my dad in the parking lot of like a Barnes and Noble.
Nice.
And yeah, which is also fed my nerddom, because I got to hang out in a Barnes and Noble every Friday and just look at books. But meet my dad, and then my dad would drive the other half hour back to his house, and I'd spend the weekends at his house. And so on one particular Friday, he picked me up and he's like, "Oh, I got this cool thing that we should listen to on the way back," and it was the Star Trek Nemesis audiobook. And I just remember, and back then when they were doing audiobooks, and again, this is my particular brand of fandom, I'll rant about how cool I think Star Trek audiobooks are. But back then, they don't do it as much now. They had like full on like audio drama level of stuff for the books. They had like sound effects and music and did this whole thing. So I got so wrapped up in how cool this story was. Like, what is this thing? What is this show, or this universe that I got to experience with the audiobook? And my dad's like, "Oh, it's Star Trek. I can show you that." And so yeah, my first ever encounter with Star Trek was the Star Trek Nemesis audiobook. And then the next thing that I remember getting was my dad bought me for that Christmas, because I just got so excited about it and was like starting to watch reruns and things, was he got me Star Trek The Next Generation Season 7 on DVD. And so I just binged that. So it was like Star Trek Nemesis, the audiobook, which is like the audiobook of probably one of the worst Star Trek movies. And then the last season of Next Generation, which, is not the worst season, but it's also like a weird place to start going into that show. Like you get your Dr. Crusher sex candle storylines and
yeah.
So it really could only go up from there. But yeah, and then from there, my dad found Star Trek Enterprise on TV, and we started watching that week to week, and it just sort of snowballed from there. And I was just so enraptured by the universe and the story, and then kind of gradually got more and more caught up in the message of the show. And that sort of became a guiding force throughout my entire life, like to this day. So yeah.
So it affected your life fundamentally. I think I can say that, right?
Just a little bit, just a hair, No, I think Star Trek probably has had the biggest impact on my life. Like I joke about it every so often in sort of like an offhanded way, but I think truly, like, I'm an agnostic person. Like I don't disbelieve in religion, but I don't have like a big religious pull in my life. But for me, Star Trek sort of became the guiding force for my morality, and my guiding force for how I try to think about the world and about people, and in the belief in that we can be better people, that we will be better people. and this just like overriding certainty in my brain that humanity will always work to better itself and that we will get to be better people. Like I just firmly believe that in my very bones. And that comes from Star Trek, and I, like I said, I joke about it, but it really feels like my faith in a lot of ways. Like I don't necessarily believe like Kirk will be born one day and come to me, but like that just belief that we will be better and we will be better. And I even have like crisis of faith moments. Like I remember, without getting too far off into this topic, but after certain political events over the past few years, I remember breaking down and crying because I'm like, I just didn't believe that humanity was capable of this, or like these are really dark and hard times and hard things, and so just having that like faith tested, but ultimately like coming back to believing like, no, like I see the beauty in humanity and the beauty in people who push to follow the better parts of themselves rather than the worst parts of themselves, and that all stems from Trek.
Yeah, it is. I think I kind of have the same feeling with this too, because I remember when I first come across with Star Trek, and like, the idea that as you mentioned, not necessarily that Kirk will born in 22 something, and we might not gonna have the Borg coming from the Delta Quadrant, because that would be silly. It would be fun though, but I mean, not fun, but it would be silly. And I'm sure like the same with Doctor Who as well. Like I would love to see the Doctor like in real life, like coming with the TARDIS. But obviously these are all fantasy creations. But the idea behind it is beautiful. And I used to be a reckless child myself when I was younger. Like in primary school, I didn't pay attention to anything or anyone. I was like, I had the wrong set of friends, and gosh, and then Star Trek came along, and it's like, hey, this is another way, the Janeway, that you can. And funny enough, it was the Janeway because I started with Voyager myself. So yeah, it's beautiful, and it's interesting how the idea itself can really just captivate the person and set a good example.
Yeah, and I mean, like in many ways, it's fables or parables. I think is the word I was looking for. They're parables in many ways. Like, you see stories in the Bible. Again, I'm not trying to be hypocritical or hate on someone's religion or anything like that. Like, again, I'm agnostic, but I certainly respect other religions, unlike maybe Gene Roddenberry would. But like, you look at stories in the Bible with Jesus, and they're just like little stories that teach you morality, and teach you how to be a better person. And in many ways, Star Trek is the same exact thing. Or even Doctor Who, or a lot of science fiction.
Yeah.
Where it's just like little stories that just show you how to be a better person, a better human being. And so that's just really what inspired how I look at the world, because I look at the world through those stories. I mean, that's what my channel is about. It's like trying to take what these stories are about and say like, this is what they mean, and this is how they can show us how humanity works, and how we can take a situation and try and find the best way to handle it or deal with it or out of it, in a way that tries to benefit or help the most people, or all people. And so, yeah, I think that's just really what Star Trek is it's just little parables that just show us how to be better. So
Yeah, no, and I think talking regarding of your channel and the idea behind the channel as well, as far as I can see from an outsider point of view, obviously you're the creative mind behind it, but you have a particular niche, which is the transgender community, which is, again, I watched many of video, and I myself had some trouble at the beginning understanding things, and your videos definitely helped me to widen my horizon. And I think it's fair to say that for many people it's really helpful. I'm not sure where I was going to.
no,
but
but I mean,
but
like,
no, I do appreciate the fact that you kind of being the representative for that group, and it helps understanding what's going on, because I have I have to be honest. I never really understood, but watching some of the videos now I have a better understanding. And again, just a big thank you for this.
Yeah, no, I mean I'm happy to do that. That's the joy of I mean of Star Trek, really. I mean, I'll bring it into that and and make this point of like there's universality in the specific. Like I just remember this is when I first came out as transgender. I just remember having this weird conversation with a friend of I was trying to explain to them how I felt about like my gender and about my life, and like I would just talk about like, oh, I had this feeling my whole life. And this friend would over and over and over and over and over in this conversation would just say, oh, I could never understand that. I could never get that. I just totally don't understand. But I totally understand this, and this. Over and over and over again in the conversation, they would just say, like, I could never understand what it means to be transgender, but I connect with that feeling that you had. And I was just like, so you can understand. Like you do, like you like you're saying that you couldn't, but you feel on an emotional level the same feelings that I felt, like maybe in a different way. Like, I felt dysphoria about my body through gender, for example, about like, oh, I don't connect with my body, it feels weird. But some people feel dysphoria about their body over weight, or how they look, or maybe a disability, or different things like that. Like we all experience like different forms of not connecting fully with our bodies. And that's just a core emotional feeling. Or like I felt like I was of two different worlds. Like I didn't know what gender I felt. Like I was born and seen as a boy, but I felt like a girl, and there was this sort of push and pull and not feeling fully part of either. And I've connected with so many people who come from biracial backgrounds, not necessarily equating them in terms of historical scope and how things have been affected, but like the core emotion of that experience of feeling from two different places is very real on a human level. And so there's that universality in the more specific you get with something, the more universal the emotions become. And that's what I saw in Star Trek. I mean, there's so many places in Star Trek that I feel seen. Like Spock, I mean, like just talking about two different worlds, Spock feels that same exact thing. He feels Vulcan and human, and he feels that pull. And in that struggle that he has, I feel the same emotions of my gender dysphoria in that. And that's what makes Star Trek so beautiful, is that it just allows us so many avenues to connect with the core human experience, the core emotional experience of just being a person. And so what I try to do with my channel is do that, to try and say like, hey, here's my specific experience as a trans person. And well, I guess just straight up, I say, here's this experience in Star Trek, and that's what gets people in. Like Star Trek nerds are like, oh, I like Star Trek. Let's talk about Star Trek. And I say, here's this emotional experience in Star Trek. Here's how it connects to me on an emotional level. And maybe someone will say like, oh, I following that through line, I feel that emotion, I feel that connection. And then I try to bring it back out a little bit and say like, and here's how it connects to all of us as humans. Like here's the universal part of that specific experience. And I think that's just like the beauty of being human, of like we have all these diverse, disparate experiences, but they all reveal the same core beauty of humanity. It's all just a prism that we're just looking at the same light through. And I think that's what makes humanity beautiful, and it's what makes Star Trek beautiful for reflecting that. So.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you, and that's the funny about different people talking about different aspects of Star Trek, because it's not necessarily the same how I see things. And I mean, with Spock, you translate it into your personal experience. With Spock, not necessarily me, but like if I think about Spock, I can see the two worlds battling with each other. But for me, he always felt like an outsider of of like, hey, I'm here alone. Like, there's not much Vulcans in Starfleet. I mean, we didn't really see it. We don't know. So there could have been, but we didn't see them in TOS. So it's like, I'm alone between humans, and it's like, that translates to someone else who feels kind of alienated between all of these different peoples. But having this other perspective, that inner battle within Spock of his human and Vulcan side, and that is just, it's just beautiful. As you said, it's just beautiful.
Yeah. And I mean, like, you just extrapolate it out to like all of Star Trek. Like, it's the same thing. It's like all of these different people, like Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Uhura, and then like, all the other shows, like they're all very vastly different people, clearly, but they're all working towards the same goal of just betterment and understanding each other. And like, there's this. I mean, even Gene Roddenberry fell into this trap of like being like, there's no conflict in the future, and everyone just works together. It's like, no, it's not that there's no. What I find beautiful about Star Trek, I shouldn't speak for everybody, but it's like, it's not that there's no conflict. It's not that there's no disagreements, but it's that those disagreements are accepted and the differences are accepted. Like Spock was the outsider. He was different than the predominantly human crew, but just because he was different and quote unquote the outsider didn't mean that he wasn't just as accepted as everyone else. And so it's not just the fact that there is no conflict or is no difference or things like that. It's the fact that those conflicts and differences of opinion are an accepted part of it, and not just an accepted part of it, but a celebrated part of it, to see things from different points of view, so that we can all become greater than the sum of our parts. Like, I mean, to use an interesting metaphor that now I'm just thinking about, like, you look at the Borg, like, people say, oh, the Borg are like communism sort of thing, where it's like, but the horror of the Borg is not like, they're a weird reflection of the Federation. Like, the Federation is like all people trying to work together for one common goal, and that's kind of what the Borg are. But the reason that there's a difference between the Borg and then the Federation is that the Borg all speak with one mind. They all have the same thought. And that's horrible, because even though they ostensibly want to have the same overarching goal as the Federation, but the Federation is made better by the fact that there are disparate voices and conflicting voices within it. And that's how we get to something better than we are. That's how we push ourselves to be better, because we listen to differences and find, again, the universality in the specific and in the difference.
I was just about to say that the main difference, I think, between the Borg and the Federation, that the Federation politely knocks on your door while the Borg just marches in.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you will be assimilated. It's like, hey, can I have a first contact with you?
Exactly. I guess that's what Kuzma was really worried about. It's like, they say they come in peace.
Yeah, I was like, no, not really. They have to wait till they've made the Borg, and then they will not come in peace, I guess. Gosh. Star Trek has changed a lot. What do you think?
It really has, but I think that's part of the fun. I don't know, like I said, like, I mean, we could get into this whole conversation about like the current crop of,
it's like another mini documentary on your channel.
Yeah, it really is. But like, I don't know, again, Star Trek is diverse. It's a diverse thing, and I certainly understand the impetus and joy of wanting to see the old shows again. I mean, there's a certain like element of like, I just watched Lower Decks, the first episode we had. The second episode's showing how showing how the sausage gets made. The second episode is Lower Decks, premieres tonight for people in the United States. But it's I get a little bit of nostalgia watching that show, because it's so next generation. And I like that, and it's like enjoyable to feel that sort of like nostalgia for the old show, or even like shows like the Orville kind of do the same thing. But what I love about Discovery and Picard are that they are still reflecting, again, that same core light of what Star Trek is, which is the love of diversity and difference in humanity. But they are trying to show that light in a different way, and trying to say that thing in a different way. And are they perfect? Are they the perfect reflections of to extend this metaphor out way too far, like the perfect reflections of that light? No, Like I think there are problems with Discovery and Picard that I don't find them perfect, but I think that they're trying something new and something different, and I appreciate that because that's the message of Star Trek. Just like see things from a different way, but it's the same idea in a different way, and it doesn't mean that like Deep Space Nine, Next Generation, Voyager don't exist. They still do. They're still there for you to find and discover and hopefully fall in love with. But like I want to see something new and different, and ultimately sometimes maybe even fail. Like these shows may fail, like make mistakes or take a wrong avenue in storytelling and mess up, but I think that that's interesting. I'm always the kind of person that like loves the ambitious failure rather than the successful sort of regurgitation of the same thing. And so I just think that that's it's really cool that I just really appreciate that Star Trek today is just trying to take risks and trying to do something different. As Kirk says, risk is our business. So
that's why we abort her, and when we say her, it's Star Trek.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's funny because I did have some kind of a disconnect feeling with the new shows, and I watched Discovery season 1, season 2. I mean, it was okay. It's not my favorite, and whoever listened to this podcast and whoever read my reviews, they know that I'm not in favor of Discovery. I appreciate it, and I appreciate Picard as well. But
you're an awful person. How dare you hate Discovery? It's like no.
Let me remove my shirt, and disco sucks.
Yes. You're not a real fan. Fandom menace. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but it's true. I mean, the much I loved Picard in Next Generation and in the movies, the much I didn't. I enjoyed more aspect. I enjoyed seeing other things in Picard than the main character himself, which is. I never thought that I'm gonna say this, but yeah, it kind of getting to the point when I'm kind of disconnecting with new things, and not necessarily out of hate, just doesn't resonate with me. But then with this podcast, sometimes I have these conversations with people, and like yourself, and I have this different idea, different opinion about the new show and the new stuff. Like, why is it actually good? And then I start clicking in my mind, like, hey, okay, that makes sense. That yeah, this is it. And suddenly I start reconnecting with it. So I always happy. I'm always happy when I hear different opinions about this, because that just kind of pulls me back into the things that I love, and you just did that too.
Yeah, well, hey, I'm glad I could do that for you. I mean, like it's fascinating. Like we connect with different things at different times in our lives too, right? Like, I'm rewatching Deep Space Nine right now. Actually, I'm kind of going through. Yeah, it's been kind of fun, and I like see so much more in the show than I did as a kid. Or like I think there's like an episode in season 1 where there's like a virus or something that's on the ship, and they like have some like jokes about like Quark trying to like keep things open despite like it's possibly spreading the virus, and I'm like, oh wow, that weirdly speaks to today, but I don't think they intended it to, and back then. So it's like different things connect to different times in our lives, and that's just like, again, part of like how I had a greater point that I was going to come to with that, but it's just like, I don't know, like these shows and these things, like we can all appreciate them in our own way or not appreciate them in our own way, and that's totally okay and cool. And it's totally okay to be like, look, Discovery doesn't speak to me, and I can even understand being frustrated for some people being like, oh, I really am disappointed by where Trek's going. But the point of that is not to, not to point fingers at any particular people, but it's like the point of that is not to like go online and start hating on it and hating people and saying blah blah blah, these people are awful and how dare they ruin this thing that I made, but just to be like, this is my thoughts on it. This is my criticism of it. Because I think we all should try to be constructive in our feedback, and constructive in our conversations, and trying to find ways to build each other up, and try and say like, this is a problem I had with Discovery season 2, and maybe the writers will see that, or we as fans can talk about it, and maybe they'll course correct or get better. And that, again, we we all become better through the differences of opinion and become better people, and the shows become better through difference of opinion, as long as we try and be constructive, not destructive. And I think that's just what I think makes Star Trek fans really great. Like, yes, there are some loud voices that are destructive, in my opinion. But I think the large majority of fans are just people who want to be constructive. Like, even like you said, Star Trek Discovery sometimes doesn't always connect with you, but you try to come at it with a constructive point of view, and try and like talk with other people about it, and try and find things that you appreciate about it. And I think that's cool. And I have the same feeling too. I don't think Picard or Discovery have been perfect. Like, I don't even think they're the best. Contrary to what some people would in my comments and things would say, I don't think they're the best Star Trek shows, but they have the potential to be. They also have the potential to be someone else's favorite Star Trek shows, and that's totally cool and amazing. So
absolutely. And who said that Move Along Home cannot be the #1 most loved Star Trek episode of all time?
Exactly. hey, I still say, you remember Threshold is one of the few Emmy-winning episodes of Star Trek. So, it's somebody had to enjoy it.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think we kind of approached to the shining moment of this podcast, where we do this little impression game that I'm pretty sure you
Yep.
you kind of heard about now, and I'm still thinking it just might be too cheesy for some people, but maybe for the sake of it, I'm gonna keep it as it is. So do your chat.
All right. Let's see. This is either going to be very awful or very space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Ba, ba, da, ba.
Oh my.
That's oh my. See, I could always do George Takei pretty well. Hello. So, but Shatner was always hard because you always just he like is a weird he's become like a weird parody of himself that even he has kind of like fallen into. So it's always hard to like do Shatner without like becoming a parody of Shatner. So
it's funny. I Kevin Pollak, a very good actor, and he's like, I think he's one of the best William Shatner, Captain Kirk impressionists out there. And William Shatner I watched an interview with Shatner, and he said that it's like, I don't understand this guy. It's like he just like goes this. I'm like, that's not me. and then Kevin told us like, yeah, that's you, Bill. You just don't hear yourself.
Exactly. I mean, it's interesting to like see how people like see us in a weird. I mean, I was joking about at the top of this thing when you were complimenting me. I'm like, that's me. No, I don't see that. And it's just funny. It's like we always like how we get seen by others is not how we see ourselves, which is kind of always funny.
It is crazy. I mean, I remember, and again, sorry for my audience if I repeat myself with this, but because I tend to repeat myself so many times, and every story is like, oh, so new, but I told it like a million times. But I remember when I studied YouTube, and I think after 1 or 2 years, when I'm not saying that my little venture is like so well known, but it's out there, and it's some of them are watchable videos too. But I remember when like some people like, actually we were in Taiwan with my wife, and then we have I apparently have a fan there. I was like, what? Am I having a fan? It's crazy, but it's a weird feeling to to have this, and it's like people think that like you're like such a, I don't know, talented person, and I'm struggling. If they would know that I'm struggling sometimes to record a video, like the 5 minutes that you see takes 2 days to edit. Sometimes it's coconuts.
Oh no, I get that too. Like I had a weird moment. Like I was I think it was like a year or two ago. I was in Burbank, near where I live, to go see a movie, and someone just like was like, "You're Jessie Gender." And I'm like, "Yeah," and they just got like so excited to see me, and I'm just like, which was cool. It was a really wonderful experience and like really nice. But I'm also just like, you see this weird, like cool person, and I'm like, I'm a mess, and I don't understand how anyone likes the stuff that I do. And I mean, like, and yeah, I mean, it's they don't see like a lot of the hard work that goes into making these things. Like, I just think about, this is probably gonna be a harder story, but I just think about like one of the things that moved me and shocked me the most was I did a video like 2 or 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago. I've lost all track of time because we're in the middle of a pandemic. But there was a video a while ago that was like my explanation of why I decided to get breast augmentation surgery. And when it was like this long explanation of that, and like me trying to talk about like body dysphoria and things like that. And I did the video. It came out, and people reacted beautifully to it and really loved it. And I was so shocked because making that video, I hated it. I hated it to the point of like when I was writing it, I kept like getting angry and saying like this isn't good enough. I'm not explaining myself. It's not making sense. And then when I actually was shooting it, I started shooting the video and reading the script that I had written, and literally just having to stop recording. And literally, like, there was one point where I got in a ball and cried while filming that video because it's just like, I don't think that this is good enough, and I wanted to explain it in a way that would connect with people, to try and explain like why this is important to me. But I just felt like my words weren't doing the feeling that I felt justice, and so I just started like crying on the floor. And then I got up and I kept doing, because I'm like, I just don't have the energy to change this. I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna do the video and be done with it. And you can maybe even, if you look closely at the video, you can even see like there's some moments where you can like see my countenance has changed because I'm like, I had just been crying. But then the video came out, and I was just, it's one of my higher performing videos, and so many people were touched by it in the comments and felt like moved by it, and as you say, people who didn't feel like they understood. And it's just, so it goes back to that feeling of like, how we see ourselves and how we judge ourselves and how we think about ourselves is not always how we're perceived by others, and sometimes we're our own harshest critics. And and sometimes we're not harsh enough. I would say certain other people need to be harsher on themselves. But yeah, it's always so weird about like just seeing how people's perspective of you is just vastly different than your own perspective. And so it's just a cool, it's a cool, and for me, I'm thankful enough that it is also a very rewarding experience, to see that happen.
No, it is. It is, and some people doesn't see the struggle sometimes, and the other moments that you have in your life. I mean, but basically, and I did mention that I don't really like using the content creator on myself, because I don't believe that I'm a content creator. I'm just a dude who talks Star Trek sometimes on front of the camera or behind.
Right now, we're creating content right now.
Oh
this
my
is
God.
Content being created. You're doing it.
Oh my God. Yeah. So like, and it's crazy. Like, and like I always underestimate myself. I had this tendency as well, but then some people said that, like, oh, this is amazing, and like I really enjoyed listening to this, and it's like, and some people said, oh, your sound is so soothing, and like, really? I was like, maybe that's what people listen to it and they fall asleep.
Yeah, no, I will say you have a great ASMR voice, and that, I mean that in the most complimentary ways. You have a very, very, very beautiful voice that I just enjoy listening to when I listen to your podcast. So, I mean that totally complimentary.
Maybe I should have to branch out ASMR Trek, or Trek ASMR, yes, or something.
Do like Trek sleep stories. That would be great. But yeah, no, people don't people don't see the hard work and like all that like effort. Like, I spend so much time working on my videos. It takes forever, and then like you do all this work for like 5 minutes of work, as you say, and it's just like out there, and people watch it. It's like, yeah, that was a great 5 minutes, and it affected me. But it was like, yeah, those 5 minutes were like 4 weeks of my life. I'm glad they mean something to you. I mean, I guess that's with any creative endeavor, right? Like we look at like we hear the stories about Discovery right now, season 3, and how much they had to work to get that out because of the pandemic. And it's like, we're gonna watch it, and I'm gonna enjoy. I mean, we'll be talking about it for years and years and years and years and years, I'm sure. But like, also be like, I'm gonna experience for an hour, like this thing that someone worked on for like 6, 7, 8 months of their lives. I'm gonna like spend an hour on it, and that's the full extent of.
Same with movies. I mean, I think when Nemesis, even the other movies like Beyond, they were in production for like a year or almost 2 years, and then we watched essentially a 2-hour movie, and then it's like, oh, it was okay. But then if you think about how much effort they put into not just special effects, and it's easy to say it's like, oh, special effects, CGI, it's easy to make. It's like, no, it's not. Have you done it?
Like the crappy, like you look at my little green screens on my video, like the crappy green screens that I do is like take me forever just to do that, just to like make cool backgrounds. And my crazy need of like, I can't do the same background all the time. I have to change it up. It's like, so I like always create new ones and all this stuff. So yeah, it's like, no, that takes a lot of time to do that stuff. Even if it's just like a dumb effect of like a thing popping up on my screen. So
yeah. So I think the whole podcast at the end, it boils down to one question, and that's the kind of the theme of the podcast as well, warm blanket. As I keep saying, and probably people get bored of it all the time because I say it in the end, that Star Trek is a warm blanket for me, and that's how I feel about all the show. But of course, the warm blanket can mean different things to anyone. So I wonder, what is your warm blanket when it comes to Star Trek?
See, I knew I was gonna get this question, and I've been like trying to like think about what my response is. Yeah. Oh gosh. No. Oh, you springing it on me. Gotcha journalism, as you were joking about before we started recording.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. I was thinking about this question because I knew you were gonna ask it, and there's so many answers that I could give. So many different things, and I was trying to like pick one, and I think the real answer is kind of what I hinted at earlier, which is this belief in the betterment of humanity. Star Trek for me, the warm blanket for me about the show is this belief that we will not only can get better, but we will get better. We will get through this. We will get through the hard times. We will not only get through the hard times, but be better for it. And that in the end, we believe we will pursue the best parts of ourselves, pursue what makes humanity great, what makes humanity beautiful. And even if we falter in that, we will always pick ourselves up and go into it. Like my favorite Roddenberry quote of all time that I used to use all the time in my videos. I since stopped using it, but it was like, I forget the exact wording, but it's essentially, it does not matter if we will never reach our ultimate goal. The pursuit is its own reward. Like we must always try. That's the exact quote. We must always try to be more than we are. It does not matter if we will never reach our ultimate goal. The pursuit is what is. Oh God, I almost had it. But the pursuit is what makes it worthwhile. Essentially, it's a Gene Roddenberry quote, and you can look it up, the specific wording. But it's just like, we will always try to better ourselves. We will never ever be perfect, ever. Just like no Star Trek show is perfect.
Yeah.
But we will always try to pursue it, and in the pursuit of trying to be better, we will become better. And I think that's really the most beautiful, warm feeling that for me Star Trek can give me. So.
And that's a beautiful way to kind of envelope this conversation as it is. Jesse, it was fantastic to talk to you. I'm so happy that we finally got to do this.
Me too. Thank you.
It was my pleasure, honestly. Before we sign off, where people can find you, where they can reach out to you, what's your what's new in the terms of lives of Jessie Gender, anything you want to promote?
I do way too much. So the best places, the best place to find me is Jessie Gender on YouTube. Do videos, I try to do right now 3 videos a week, with Fridays being my main video. So if you're looking for like my main big video every week. I do a big video on Friday that's sort of like a longer discussion of a topic. And you can kind of get a taste of what that is through our whole conversation in this episode. Other place you can find me, I'm on all the social medias at Jessie Gender. Twitter is probably the best place to hear me rant about stuff. And then I also do my own couple podcasts. I do What the Frell with Council of Geeks, which is a Farscape rewatch podcast with, like I said, Council of Geeks, who's another LGBTQ geek YouTuber. And then I do Star Trek Behind the Lines, which is a Star Trek RPG comedy podcast with Lore Reloaded and Lore Runner. So you can listen to that. And then I have a Patreon, which is where you can support me if you want to help make my channel better and help me pay the bills and all that fun stuff. So, yeah. Way too much.
Awesome.
Do way too much.
So no matter where people will find you, can find you.
Exactly.
No,
Look somewhere,
awesome.
You'll probably see me somewhere.
That's awesome. Well, again, thank you very much for being in the show and accepting the invitation. It was a really joy to talk to you. So thank you very much again for being in here and enriching the warm blanket experience, and and for all my listeners as well. Thank you very much for joining in for another episode of the Warm Blanket Podcast. And until next time, live long and prosper. And that was it for this episode. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and rest assured, new episodes will be coming out every week where we sit down with a Trekkie to find out what makes us feel good about Star Trek and to discover what is our warm blanket made of. If you really enjoyed listening to this podcast, please leave a review on your favorite podcasting app. It would really mean a lot to me. To find out more about this audio adventure, please visit TREKKERPRISE.com/podcast, where you can also listen to the previous episodes. Thank you again for listening to yet another episode of the Warm Blanket Podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode. Live long and prosper.